This video is going to be as spoiler-free as possible, as And Roger is a game I think everyone needs to experience with their own eyes from their own perspective, which is one of the reasons I've held off on making a video about it, but I recently realised that what I actually want to talk about with And Roger can be done in an almost completely spoiler-free way. This video is going to be about how And Roger, in my opinion, is the most innovative point-and-click game I've ever played, and maybe you've ever played as well. We're going to be specifically looking at the opening chapter of the game, including the onboarding. We shall blitz through each individual usage of just a single input this game uses, and then we shall pull back and look at some data and paint a picture around why And Roger is such an innovative point-and-click game. Let's go. So we start off in the tutorial section. Simply press the button to proceed. Then we have two sections where the player has to infer that the buttons on the left and right of language and display types are left and right buttons without the usage of icons. Then we have another standard click, followed by a standard click with an animated response, i.e. a delayed response. Then we have a captcha which teaches the player to click based on context rather than just clicking a button. Then we have a repeated click to enter a name, which you obviously can't do because the only input is left click, followed by a single and multi-choice question. Then we get into a string of actions which are less so about the actions themselves and more so about focus. As the player progresses through these various stages, the screen gets more and more distorted, making the player rely heavier and heavier on just clicking the button that they can see. Focusing on the button is a very important lesson to teach the player for the rest of the game. We finish up the tutorial by repeatedly clicking to see the chapter name. With all that being said, let's just do a quick click tally. In the tutorial we have 9 standard clicks, 3 multi-clicks and 4 repeated clicks. Funnily enough, apart from one point of contention later on in chapter 1, that's it for repeated clicks. Introduced the mechanic for the tutorial and then the game was just done with it. Straight after the tutorial we are introduced to a new type of click, the rapid click. Similar in terms of input to the repeated click, but it evolves to incite a different player behavior. If you stop clicking, progress resets, so you have to keep clicking fast to proceed. Then we have a standard click with a multi-choice question, followed by another rapid click to get out of bed. Again, if you stop, she will just go back to sleep. Next we have another new mechanic, the timed click. Firstly, the player uses a standard click to start the focusing effect. Then once the clock is in focus, the player has to click again to proceed. They have to time this correctly in order for it to work. Then another question with just a standard click. Then we have a multi-click sequence where the player has to get toothpaste on a toothbrush. The key thing here is that the player has no context whatsoever as to what the buttons do initially. Their space on the screen does not actually correlate to what's going to happen. So this sequence requires trial and error. Carrying on with brushing teeth, we have another multi-click, but this time set up logically. Clicking right, brushes right, clicking left, brushes left, using the lessons learned from choosing our language and resolution at the beginning of the game. Then we have 2 questions with standard clicks, followed by a multi-click, but introducing a new mechanic where buttons spawn on click. In this particular sequence, the buttons you press don't actually matter. Moving on, we have a standard click, but let's just pause right there. Now, of course, people who have played And Roger before might be a bit annoyed that I'm taking a lot of the context out of it, pretty much all of the context, as that is just so much of the game. Well, here I want to shine a bit of a spotlight on it, again without any spoilers. Here, the standard click rotates the camera. The point of this is to evolve on the standard click into a time click mechanic we have gotten used to at this point. As the camera rotates, a phone comes into view. The player has to click again to stop the rotation and then focus on the phone with a time click. This is one of many, and I mean many, insanely cool ways the game uses visuals to really elevate the point and click mechanics in this game. I mean, I don't know if anybody was expecting this 2D visual point and click game to all of a sudden start rotating in 3D. Anyway, once focused on the phone, we move on to dialing, another multi-click which requires a specific order that the player has no way of knowing without trial and error. Then we move on to eating breakfast with a similar multi-click, no context setup, but with the addition of more buttons spawning. This requires the player to not only remember which buttons do what, but also which buttons are new and therefore don't do anything. Then we have another variation of the standard click into timed click. The player clicks the button to start the spoon moving, then they have to press it again when the spoon is in the right spot. In the game at this point we have a short break, so let's also take a short break in this video to tally up the mechanics used from the end of the tutorial to now. We have 8 standard clicks, 5 multi-clicks, 4 of them with no context, 4 time clicks, 2 rapid clicks, and 2 button spawns on click. Let's move on to doing some walking. First we had a standard click to progress the footsteps, but we have to find the buttons by hovering over different parts of the screen, which is a new twist in this mechanic. Then we have the same deal, but the button is constantly presented and we have to rapidly, or just repeatedly, press the button to run. Now this is what we were talking about earlier with the point of contention. Strictly speaking, this is more of a repeated click as the progress doesn't really reset, but based on the context, almost all players will be rapidly pressing this button. Then we have a sequence of 5 doors that we have to get through, with all of them, apart from the first one, involving a standard click with no context and moving buttons. This is a standard click as opposed to a multi-click because there is only one button that needs to be pressed as the rest do nothing. Continuing the theme of repetition in context to build tension, we then have to push the hand away 3 times with one standard click, followed by a rapid click to fully push the hand away. Onto the final 3 sequences now, 2 of which are by far the most impressive we have seen so far. We have a timed click which is based on where the vision cone is on screen, as if you walk into it then you have to restart, followed by the first instance of a hold click where the player has to hold down the button when the man isn't looking, which of course, yes, is in combination with a timed click. And then finally we have a classic multi-click no context setup, except this time the visual representation of what is happening plays with our assumptions, as really we just need to open the door, we don't need the key. Combining all mechanics together in a list, we have 27 standard clicks, 9 multi-clicks, 4 repeated clicks, 4 rapid clicks, 6 timed clicks, 9 clicks with no context, 2 button spawns on clicks, 4 moving buttons, 1 hold click, and finally 1 find button mechanic. That means we have 11 variations of the same input. In just the first chapter of this game, that's 11 variations which happen in different sequences, which are in different orders, and of course presented incredibly differently, but also thoughtfully and beautifully with the visuals of the game each time. And let me tell you, the variation and innovation does not stop there. Chapter 2 and 3 arguably go significantly deeper in different directions with these mechanics. This video was made for 2 reasons. Firstly, to shine a light on this incredible game, and secondly, to demonstrate just how deep a single input can go in terms of game design. And Roger's innovation is in an aspect of game development often overlooked and undervalued. After being in the industry for over 4 years, it is all too common to see the question of variety and longevity answered with bloat and scope creep. Of course, this game can only go so far, and Roger took me about an hour to complete it first time and even less the second time. But if just one input can be extrapolated to such an extent, imagine what a game can do with 4 or 5 inputs all combined together. Now this is of course somewhat metaphorical. If you actually take a step back and think about what I'm saying, you're probably picturing if it's even possible to make a player character jump in 11 interestingly different ways. But the point is more so, take a page out of Anne Rogers' book. Think deeper, not wider. Also, just play this game, seriously. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe. Please consider leaving a like as it helps this type of content get out to those who want to learn more about game design. And keep on keeping on.